Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jen, and if you're new to these parts of YouTube, I am a freelance graphic designer, illustrator, educator, and I run an Etsy shop. So this channel is where I share my journey as a creative and where I share tutorials in art, design, and creative business for viewers just like you. This week, I wanted to share more of an informative video rather than a tutorial. So the focus is on the tools that I use to film my videos for YouTube and for my courses over on Skillshare. Keep in mind, I've been doing this for quite a while, including when I was running a digital magazine, and I've saved and I've invested over time in these tools over now, I want to say almost 10 years. So with that being said, you don't need all of these items. Don't get caught up on the whole idea that you need to have a fancy camera and a tripod and all of these different things before you can start a YouTube channel or before you can start creating courses for platforms like Skillshare. Don't let the consumerism syndrome that greatly impacts our society get to you. I promise you can get started with something as simple as just your phone and a stack of books. Instead, the idea that I kind of want to push is to make what you have work. If you have a phone with a camera and, like I said, a stack of books, you can film a video. If you have some extra cash and can invest in an inexpensive tripod that you can get from somewhere like Amazon, that's a really good start. You want to make what you have work for you. Now, with all of that being said, I've been working hard over the last few years to increase the production quality of my videos and of my classes. Like I said before, I ran a magazine and I had to do things like photography for photo shoots alongside my very incredibly talented photographer friends, and I had to take video and footage for behind the scenes that I would share on this very YouTube channel before I rebranded it and focused it on what I was doing as a freelancer. And over time, I invested in things like a DSLR camera. So it made sense with my career and the work that I did that I would save and make investments here and there over the last 10 years. So for today, I'm going to break down the tips and the tools for making videos into 5 different sections. How and what I use to plan my videos, the tools that I use to film my videos, the tools that I use to record sound, the hardware that I use, and the software that I use to edit and create my videos. So let's get started. So when it comes to planning, I use the following apps to basically plan out my videos. Some people like to just kind of go off the cuff. I do that with my vlogs. I just kind of share and film whatever it is that I'm doing that day. But for videos like this, as well as especially for my tutorials and then the classes I do over on Skillshare, I have to have a plan. So I use Trello to plan out the content that I'm going to create for the whole entire year, and I track my process and my progress on this. I'm actually going to link to a video that I created where I kind of break down how I use Trello as a freelancer and I kind of get my stuff together, and then also how I use it with clients. I also use Pages for my script. I like to script out my thoughts. Even if it's not a full-blown script, I still like to get my ideas down, whether it be in like bullet point format or paragraphs. I just have to have some sort of guidance as I'm working through my videos. It just makes things a lot easier. The next thing I do in terms of organization is hard drives. I have quite a few of these little thumb drives, but I use these bigger ones for videos and video planning just because filming takes up a lot of space. So rather than take up all the space on my computer, I like to use external hard drives. This is one of my smaller ones, but I have larger like 5 terabyte ones, 2 terabyte ones, 1 terabyte ones, and then I actually specifically use one of my larger ones specifically just for filming for like my YouTube videos and for my Skillshare classes, whereas something like this, I have like freelance work and the work that I do for my courses at the university saved on this as well. So with the hard drives, I use these to store my video and audio footage, and then any additional like visuals, like visual images, drawings, titles that I've created, as well as my Final Cut Pro libraries. I do edit directly on my Mac Mini though, as it tends to render and export my videos a lot faster than if I'm working directly from my external. So if I'm on my desktop, I'm working directly from there, but say I'm on the go and I'm working on something like my laptop, which isn't as powerful, I will work off of the hard drive. It slows down just a little bit, but I find that it's just easier because I have everything already stored on there. It just takes a little bit longer to render when I'm exporting. Now for some tips when it comes to planning. So I find it helpful to organize and plan out my video content in advance. I share a video on how I do this using Trello and Google Calendar that, like I said, I'm going to link above. This keeps me on task and not struggling to come up with ideas throughout the year. I do try and remain flexible though, and I add or remove things as I need to, but for the most part, I stick to my plan throughout the year. I tend to keep in mind requests and comments for certain kind of tutorials that people like you might be watching and say, hey Jen, can you do this, or can you show us how to do that? And I also keep in mind trends in the creative industry, and I use that as inspiration for planning my content for each week. So I actually plan out my content for a whole entire year, and then I film ahead of time. I'm usually filming like this video, I'm filming this week, but it's not gonna go up for 2 weeks. So I tend to film 2 weeks out. Some people do like bulk filming where they film like 10 videos at one time. I can't do that with my schedule and my partner's schedule and just having the kids in the house, so I make use with what I have. And for me, doing 2 videos or working 2 weeks ahead for each video tends to work for my schedule. The next tip that I want to highlight is I also think it can be really helpful to script out my videos. I don't really script out my vlogs, but I do keep in mind the kinds of shots that I want to get and any kind of special projects that I want to like feature or showcase that I might be working on. But for tutorials or informational videos like my trend analysis videos that you guys saw that I put up a couple weeks ago, I tend to write out a script. It just keeps me on point. It helps me to remain concise, as I have a tendency to kind of run on and be a bit long-winded. So it allows me to outline the key points that I want to hit and that I want to discuss in each video. And I just use Pages on my Mac to write out my script, and then I will often airdrop it to my iPad, and then I use something called Teleprompter Pad app that I can then copy and paste it in and flip the actual viewing of my script so that I can use it with my teleprompter, which I'm going to talk more about that later. So the next tip I have is remember to always have your files backed up. This is like the primary reason that I have external hard drives. I work directly on my desktop as it's faster when I'm rendering and exporting, but once I have all of the files transferred from my SD cards onto my desktop, I make a copy of that entire video file, like the footage, the audio, the visuals, and the Final Cut Pro library that I've created in it. And then I put it on my external and I back it up periodically. You don't ever want to lose your edits if anything ever happens. So this is just a really great way to have that backup and kind of act as a safety measure. Now let's get into talking about tools that I use for video. So I use the following tools to actually film my videos. What you're seeing me lie down right now on the table is what I'm not using to actually make this video right now, but I do have equipment that I use for filming, for audio, and to hold my cameras essentially. So when we're looking at what I use 2 different cameras. I have a Canon D70 DSLR. This is an older camera, but it's treated me really, really well over the last few years. It has a beautiful kit lens, but I do have a shorter lens as well for it, and depending on what I'm shooting, what I'm trying to do, I might switch them out. But my main issue with this camera is that sometimes it has a tendency to have a bit of like a yellow tinge to it, but I work to correct that in post in Final Cut Pro when I'm doing my color grading. The second camera that I use is a Canon G7X Mark II. This is a newer camera for me, but I've had it for quite a few years now. And I use this for vlogging just because it's so small and compact and it's easy to carry around and it's lightweight, whereas my Canon is really heavy and lugging that thing around can be a pain. That's why it's great for like sitting and putting it on a tripod and doing these talking heads, whereas something like this is just easy to carry around. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I do use a teleprompter. While like I said, I do script things, and this makes it easier for me to work through getting all of my thoughts and ideas into my videos. It comes with an actual teleprompter that you connect to your camera and a tripod, and then there's an app that you add to your iPad called Teleprompter app. And I use this mostly for just longer scripted courses and longer tutorials or longer informational videos where there's a lot of things that I need to make sure that I hit and I talk about and I don't miss. And now when we look at tools, I also use tripods. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 tripods out right now. One for my lighting, one for my camera setup that I'm talking to right now, and then I have 2 on my table. So I have this cheaper tripod from Amazon. This, even though it's an inexpensive one, it's lasted me for, I want to say, at least 5 years now. I tend to use this one with my Canon G7X just as like a second camera. And then also sometimes I'll attach my mic to this just so that I have the mic off a table, because I have a tendency when I talk, obviously you guys see I talk with my hands, and sometimes I like bump the table and that impacts the sound, as you just heard. So having the sound, like my little mic actually attached to this, can be really helpful. And then I also have a more expensive Manfrotto MHX Pro 3W. I got this as a gift from Dwight for, I don't know, it might have been Christmas, Mother's Day, my birthday, one of those holidays. I don't remember, but I'm super thankful to him for getting me this because it's a more expensive tripod, but I have an actual adjustable arm on this, so this allows me to do overhead shots when I'm filming tutorials on my iPad for my courses or lessons that I do on Skillshare and my tutorials here on YouTube. So basically, you're able to pull the arm out of this, and then it extends out, and then it allows you to create overhead shots like this. So this has been really helpful when I do any type of like plan with me's or any tutorials that I create using my iPad. So the next thing that I utilize when I'm making my videos is lighting. I have a window to my left over here, but that tends to cause shadows on my right hand side. And this might be flipped, so like when you're looking in the camera, just know that I have a window over here, and then I have my lighting set up over here just so that it can give me some really nice lighting. I use natural light in my office, but like I said, I have this light to my right to kind of help balance it out. This just helps to even out the lighting on my face, but it does make it more difficult to film since I'm working with natural light and I can't just film whenever. My space is small. I feel like it's messy if I have lighting and equipment out all the time at all hours. It makes more sense for me to have something compact and small, and the newer ring light does a fantastic job of that for me. It's also winter here, so when it comes to lighting, again, it's a little bit more difficult because of the shorter time frame that I have to film throughout the day, but that's why I work with a plan so that I know what days I have to film and make the most of that time. The next tool that I want to highlight is my SD card. So I have them all in this little like eco-fused SD card organizer, but I have SD cards, tons and tons of SD cards for storing my video footage. So these go in my camera, all the footage is filmed and stored on that, and then I can put this into my computer either through my SD slot, or if your computer doesn't have an SD slot, you can use something like this, which is like a little external SD reader. This is an old one, so it runs really slowly, and I don't like to use it as much, but it's a Kingston, and it allows you to read like micro SD cards, MMC micros, SD MMC, and then the bigger ones that go into some of the larger cameras. So the cards range in size from things like 32 gigabytes to 64 to 200 gigabytes, and then I also have some mini SD cards and then adapters that basically allow me to insert these into like general SD slots. All right, so let's talk about some tips now when it comes to tools like this. So I utilize 2 cameras, and I do this to get multiple angles to kind of keep things interesting. I tend to do talking headshots like this a lot because it's just easier in terms of setup, but it's also important to also show the work that I'm doing or a second angle to keep viewers interested. So that's what I end up using that G7X for, whether it be B-roll or just like a second angle of how you're seeing me in terms of how I'm talking. The second tip I have is, if you can, utilize a teleprompter. These are actually surprisingly affordable, just typically under $200, and you can find them on places like Amazon. And yes, this is a little fun industry secret. I don't usually use this for my YouTube videos in terms of like my vlogs and stuff like that, but I do use it a lot for my Skillshare classes. Personally, I have trouble memorizing a long script, and rather than start and stop or have to look down at a paper script and then look back up and pause and edit all of that out of my videos, I find that I have a more natural cadence when I'm actually able to read my script using a teleprompter in front of me. Some people can't do this and they sound robotic. I don't. I think it's maybe from my years of teaching, reading aloud, and also using presentations that I find it easier. You can actually find some relatively affordable ones on Amazon. I use something called Teleprompter Pad. It's a mirror teleprompter, and I connect it to my tripod, and then I add my camera behind it. And then there's an app that comes with it that allows me to reverse the screen of my iPad, and I can actually read my script, and I just stick my iPad in the little like platform in front of the mirror, and then I can read it and look like I'm talking to you, and no one knows any better. Now let's jump into sound. So when I am working in creating videos like this, I tend to use an external directional mic. I tend to use 2 of them. If I have the actual like teleprompter connected to my big camera, I can't use my little Rode mic that connects to it. So I'll just use my one external mic. But I just find that they give me the best sound quality over the built-in mics in my camera. So I have a mini Rode mic. This little guy here, this fluffy little dude. And I usually have this attached to my DSLR, and I also use a Zoom H1 handy recorder with a muff as a second sound source. That's what I'm using right now. I'm gonna pick it up. I have it connected to this little Joby mini tripod, and I have it set up so that it's facing me and that I can talk into it. So I'm sorry if the sound is sounding funky right now. So like I said, that Rode mic is usually directly attached to my camera, so it doesn't create like a second audio file, but the Zoom mic is an individual audio source. So I have a little mini SD card in there, and then I actually have to sync that sound, that audio file, to my video footage. I usually have to put the mini SD card that's inside of the Zoom mic, and then I place it into an SD adapter, and then I transfer those files to my computer or my external hard drive. All right, in terms of tips for audio, I always suggest using 2 audio sources. It just ensures that if something happens that causes one source to not be usable, you have another. So during my time working at the magazine, I learned this the hard way when I had to do interviews where my audio got messed up and I didn't have a second source and that wasn't usable, so I couldn't, showcase that interview in terms of like video footage if I was gonna do behind the scenes stuff. So this just kind of just gives you security in terms of ensuring that you still have something usable if something, falters. The next tip I have is that I use my Zoom mic when I'm recording with my G7X, as the sound in the G7X is actually not that good straight out of the camera. And there's no way for me to attach the little Rode mic to the Canon. So I just use this when I'm working with my G7X. So when I'm vlogging, I tend to have that H1N out when I am working with my G7X. And the third tip I have when it comes to sound is, like I said earlier, I often have to sync my sound. So the best way to do this is by filming and recording at the same time. And usually I clap my hands before I start talking. This essentially creates a really loud peak in both the video and the sound, and this allows me to easily kind of match things up in the timeline over in Final Cut Pro. That's usually why you see those like clapboards used in movies or on set in Hollywood. I don't have one, so my hands act as the clapper. Now when it comes to hardware, I use the following when I'm working on my courses and my tutorials. I use a Mac Mini M1 desktop when I'm working in the office, and then if I'm working on the go, I have my old MacBook Pro 2013. I'm not a tech channel, so I'm not going to try and go through all the specs and things like that, but I did research before we invested and purchased the Mac Mini. I needed something new. My computer is getting close to being, 8 years old now, and it was definitely slowing down, and I tried to invest what I had when I first got that laptop so I can get the most memory and things like that when I purchased it, but over the years it's slowed down. And it's slowing down my work process, so we ended up investing in this. And what I found is that my Mac Mini M1 renders and exports faster than my laptop. Something that might be a 15-minute video would take me 45 minutes, maybe longer, to export it when it was completed. When I'm exporting that on my computer now, it takes like 3 minutes. But the Mac Mini M1 is faster than if I'm working off my external hard drive too, so I always just have the video file that I'm working on my desktop, and I edit it off of that. But like I said, I tend to export a copy of that onto my external hard drive just so that I have a backup just in case. I think for the affordable price that they are, it's a great option if you're looking to invest in a computer and you're doing stuff like graphic design work and video editing work, and you're taking that all very seriously. It's part of your career. This is definitely a computer that I would suggest investing in over some of the more higher priced MacBook Pros that you can buy. Alright, so when it comes to software, I use the following to edit my videos and to create thumbnails, transitions, and titles. So Final Cut Pro X, I use Final Cut Pro to edit and to color grade my videos. I know how to use Adobe Premiere, and I used it for many years before, but 2 years ago I made the transition from Adobe products to the Affinity Suite products. Due to that, I no longer had access or wanted to pay for Premiere. So while the upfront cost for Final Cut Pro is $299, if you're a student, I believe you can get it a little less expensive with a student discount. But for a professional purchasing this, it's going to cost you $299. But keep in mind, a full year of Adobe Pro CC is $239.98. And you have to pay this cost every single year. So when I looked at the cost and I compared Final Cut Pro with Premiere and the Adobe products overall, it just didn't make sense for me in terms of the pricing. I'm paying one price, I get updates, I don't have to pay extra. I mean, there may be, down the line in the future, if the makers of Final Cut Pro want us to pay for, say, an update, but so I don't have to do that right now. I paid one flat price, that's it. Whereas with Premiere and Adobe, I was basically paying to borrow the software, and I had to pay that every single year. So for the 10 years that I've been working on this, if you multiply that out, it's the cost comparison, it doesn't compare really. I use Affinity Photo for title design. As I mentioned, I made the switch from Adobe to Affinity, so I utilize Affinity Photo, which is basically similar to Photoshop, and it's a raster-based program, meaning that it is pixel-based. I use Affinity Photo to create my thumbnails, intros, my transition titles, and all of my videos, as well as my outro titles. And I export those final files as PNGs, and then I just pull those into my timeline as I'm editing a video. Now let's talk about some tips that I want you to keep in mind when you're working with software. So since Affinity Photo is a raster-based program, I always suggest making sure you create your file as big as your screen resolution at 300 dpi so that you don't encounter any kind of issues with pixelation on your screen when you're pulling in those images. That way you have no issues with pixelation. Next, I always back up my Final Cut Pro libraries, but I also find that Final Cut Pro can bloat. So the file renders all the time, and those renderings add gigabytes to your final file. So sometimes I'll see like a file is 300 and something gigabytes, and I'm like, why is this so big? I only have, this in it. You do have to go in and delete your generated files and delete render files after you're done with your videos. This basically decreases the size of your file, and you basically can just go into your program, select file, and then select delete generated event files from the library that you're working in. Another thing to keep in mind with Final Cut Pro is that I'll notice that Final Cut Pro will back up my libraries into my system folders too. So I have to go in and delete them after I've backed up the files on my external hard drive. So if you go into your Finder options and you go to Go in your upper menu, You want to select home and then go to your movies file, and then you'll find a folder called Final Cut Backups. You can then delete any backups that you no longer need, and then this just keeps Final Cut Pro from clogging up your system memory. So the last tip I have is to dedicate an external hard drive only for your videos and any files that you're editing relating to video, whether it be like YouTube or Skillshare. Have an external file dedicated just to that. So that is what this one is. So this isn't a solid state drive. It has one of those drives that moves on the inside. I'm actually gonna likely purchase a solid state drive for my Mac Mini in the coming weeks. But this is done really well for me. It's 5 terabytes. It's got a lot of memory, but like I said, what you'll find is that video takes up a lot of memory, so you're probably gonna invest in more than one of these. Alright, so that's it for today's video. I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If you filmed, let me know what tools that you use in the comment section below. If you're thinking about starting a channel or launching some courses, what do you plan to teach? What are you looking to share with the world? Finally, if you like videos like this, feel free to let me know in the comments below, and please make sure to leave this video a like. And if you're not already, definitely take a moment to subscribe to my channel. This is a really simple but wonderful way to support my channel and the work that I do, and it keeps you up to date on when I release more videos and tutorials just like this. I appreciate the support. I will see you in the next one. Bye.